Okay, so I'm Kurt Koitzer. I'm a professor here at ECS, and we're having a panel today. The title of the panel is Future of Enterprise Technology. I don't know how many have you ever introduced people, who are dating, right? And sometimes there's some chemistry, but sometimes you kind of sit there and you do the introduction. You have the sense, these people, this person wants to talk to them. They want to talk to this person. What am I doing here? Right? So I think, you're here basically because Hummer Winblad and some of their new companies are here. And these folks are here because they want to meet some Berkeley faculty and grad students and get some entrepreneurial ideas. And so I'm going to go light on the passionate panel part and inquiry into deep questions like what is enterprise software, and really just try and mix it up between the panelists here and the audience. And I think later we'll be taking lots of questions from the audience, and then we'll gradually transition that into the wine and cheese here. So to get started, what I'd like, starting with John there at the end, is just that the panelists would introduce themselves. Don't be shy about your past accomplishments, and and John, particularly you're as a co-founder of Hummer Winblad, you're in a little bit different situation from your funding companies. Maybe talk a little bit about how you look at companies that you're funding.
Sure. Thank you, Kurt. I am John Hummer. I'm one of the founders of Hummer Winblad. We started Ann Winblad.
John, you may want to go ahead and.
Is that better? Is that a little better? Okay. In 1989, Ann Winblad and I, and soon after Ann and I started, Mark Gorenberg joined us. We started at that time, a small fund. Small size of it turned out to be $30 million. It was small then, certainly is small now. But the idea was, believe it or not, to become the first and only venture fund that exclusively funded software. And although many venture funds do fund software startups, if you go back 16 years, they did not. The roots of Silicon Valley came out of the semiconductor industry into hardware. The original venture guys came out of those companies, and so the lineage of venture capital largely was hardware oriented. And believe it or not, we were the first fund to specialize in software. We also made a strategic decision, although I can't say we were entirely successful at this. We located in Emeryville, and we did that in 1989. Now we're now in San Francisco, but we were in the Howell Street projects over here for about 6 years. And again, the reason that we chose to locate in the East Bay was, there were two reasons. One, there were no other venture funds here, and so we thought we would have a tactical advantage in finding deals here. And as it turned out, we did. We funded Wind River Systems, we funded Scopus, we funded Farallon, and a couple others, and we did quite well in all of those. So from a tactical decision, it worked out. Now, we also chose to be in Emeryville in the beginning because we thought that all of the kind of entrepreneurial activities coming out of Stanford were already kind of well covered by my competitors in Sand Hill Road, and we thought that trying to compete was going to be very hard to do. And we thought that Berkeley was less well covered by the venture community. And so we hoped to make inroads, and quite honestly, we sort of failed at that. We really did not get into the faculty or the grad student community early on. So guys like Stonebreaker and these guys, they went to other venture firms when they chose to. So half of the strategy worked and half really did not. But as you see, we haven't given up. Interesting, back to San Francisco, and I think now we spend some more time here than we did when we were in Greenville. Fast forward 16 years, we have funded software companies all along the way in all the different platforms, from the desktop, as the desktop moved to networking computing, to client server, to web-based, and now we have, in the latest, what I call the latest disruption, which has to do with the delivery model, we've invested quite heavily in software as a service companies. We have like 9 or 10 of them. Salesforce.com is not an investment that we have, but that's probably the prototype of or at least that's the star at the moment with this new delivery mechanism. So we have a pretty good team. We're pretty transparent in the way we deal with entrepreneurs, and of course maybe these guys should say that or not. I don't know if they'll say the same thing, but my own background, I was born and raised in Virginia. I'm a product of public schooling, and I went to Princeton and Stanford Business School.
So, Rajiv.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Chris. My name is Rajiv Baslow, and
I think you're going to need to bring it just a little closer to you. There we go.
Is this any better?
You just do the rock star thing.
So anyways, so we're funded by Multi-Tenant, and that's why you're here, obviously. And we're an enterprise software. Image is the company name. We were founded in late 2001, which was not the greatest time for founding companies, but we were back from that era, if you know. In terms of what Image does, we're into enterprise software that's used to back up your enterprise data. Essentially, what you're looking at is the traditional backup that's there today is tied a lot to the tape way of doing things. What you're doing is you're running a schedule on your host and you're sending the data to a tape drive. Over the last few years, what has happened is that disk economies have come down quite significantly. So what that has enabled is you can actually start using disk as the secondary storage media. So this is really big business in terms of secondary storage and backup, and runs into billions of dollars. So this part of the market is ripe for a big change, and the change is already happening. What we're trying to do is leverage the shift into using disk as a secondary media. So instead of trying to do a backup at the end of the day tied to a schedule, you can actually think of backup as something that happens when you actually change your data itself. So instead of doing it at the end of the day, it's happening continuously. So we hear a lot of buzzwords. If you're into storage, you'll hear a lot of buzzwords about something called CDP, continuous data protection. So essentially we use continuous data protection as the technology within our product to enable backups at the enterprise level. So from a business perspective as to who would use it, it's some of the mid-tier enterprises, goes anywhere from $100 million to $1 billion in revenues. And what they do with our software is they actually protect it locally, and there's a lot of business need to be able to protect it across multiple sites. So you'd be able to send your data on a continuous basis to a remote site. So this is basically disaster recovery type of stuff. So that's in terms of what Image does. And as far as my background goes, I've been in the storage field for the last close to 15 years or so. Previous to Image, I was at a company called Gadzooks. I'm not sure if you're part of the term called SAN, Storage Area Networks, which is predominantly where all of the data in the enterprises and large organizations is stored. That was a term coined by my previous company, and it was involved in a lot of the networking aspects of networking storage, especially things such as fiber channel switching, and a lot of other virtualization things associated with storage area network switching.
So Rajiv, I know there's a lot of budding entrepreneurs in that industry. Could you tell a little bit about the entrepreneurial spark of how you started your company, and what was the day you decided you wanted to have a new company?
Yeah, actually, we're a little different in that probably at least the one of the companies here that didn't come out of a university. This was more coming out from the industry itself. So pretty much, if you looked at how the storage industry has evolved, it has been tied to the OEM-centric way of doing business, as in there are large companies like EMC and IBM and HP that control the storage market for the most part. And when we actually brought the SAN stuff to the market, we actually had visibility into the end customers. And one of the main reasons for storage network stuff to get off the ground was, one, the speeds were orders of magnitude better than what was the prevalent LAN technologies. And that was used for backup. And a lot of people faced issue with doing backups, and it was taking them hours to days to complete some of their backups. So it was actually a direct customer need. And the other thing was, being in the storage industry, we had a little leg into knowing what the future was in terms of disk prices. So it's a combination of seeing what the customer needed and the ability to spot the trend in terms of reduction in disk prices, and be able to get the technology together to take advantage of it.
So Rajiv, I think for you as an entrepreneur, that's all it takes, I think. But I think a lot of the folks sitting there are thinking, well, that's spotting an opportunity. What gives you the courage to wake up one morning and say, I'm gonna go start my own company?
Well, I can't speak for the rest of the guys, but in terms of myself, I couldn't see doing anything different. Because my first company, as in first corporate company in the U.S. was CITRIS, and it was a startup. So we, pretty much when it was started, it was like 10 people when I came on board. And we kind of, back then nobody knew, even the term SAN wasn't coined. So kind of got to see how the thing can evolve and see that change the entire industry. So once you're in that kind of a situation, it's hard to go to a larger company, as in Gadgets was bought over by Broadcom, which is a pretty large company, as you guys probably know. It wasn't a good fit for me, and I can just see myself doing anything but trying to recreate a similar situation. As luck may have it, the technology and the things transpired could give me the chance to do that again.
And what about Hummer? Were you going to say some good things about Hummer one more?
You'll have to, it's okay.
One thing is there are only venture capital, and I can say, again, harking back to previous experience, one of the things we had there was we had a really good thing into going in terms of bringing new technology in terms of storage network. But then one of the things we saw was that the board wasn't really involved with the company. And even though we were one of the hottest IPOs and all that, and we had real revenue to prove that, we didn't really make something real out of that. Because it's not a company you see standalone. There are other companies that had started about the same time, had done less than us at that time, but they're still standing and doing well. At least in my view, one of the things that we didn't have was an active and involved board. So at least personally speaking, I think it's a major difference, because it keeps you on the edge, it makes you deliver on things. So I can say that Hummer guys have been really supportive. I'm not saying John Stanford here.
He's a big guy, isn't he? He's right next to you.
But I gotta say, I mean, Doug's are board members, and Prashant's very involved. They've been really, really supportive of it. So I can't say that I have similar experiences in the past, and their understanding of us in terms of there are certain limitations we work under and things like that. So I gotta say that they've been very supportive, and I think we were lucky to actually get them on board as our VCs.
All right, thanks. So Rita, you want to tell us about yourself and your company?
So my name is Guido Appenzeller. I'm a co-founder and currently CTO of Voltage Security, a portfolio company from Winblad. Originally studied physics in Germany, got a diploma there, spent some time in France and Japan, eventually got a PhD from Stanford. Stanford is like an engineering school on the peninsula, close to college, you might have heard of it. So just to give a little background on what Voltage is doing. Voltage Security is built around a new technology called identity-based encryption. Is anybody here computer science? Okay. So it's basically a way of doing encryption without having public-private key encryption without needing explicit public keys and without needing certificates. What it means at a business level is that you can build encryption infrastructure or key management infrastructure for large corporations that's a lot more lightweight and user-friendly than existing products, specifically PKI. If you've ever used something like secure email or PGP or something like that, it's not exactly intuitive to use. It's, I think, one of the few applications that somewhat scares me as a computer science PhD. And so based on that technology, we're building communication solutions for very large enterprises to communicate internally as well as with external partners such as customers. Our biggest deployments are in finance, healthcare. We have now deployments up to about 200,000 seats. Obviously 200,000 people are using these solutions. Vultr Security was founded in 2002 as a Stanford startup. We started with 2 undergrads, myself as the, I guess, senior guy, and a professor, Dan Monet, who wanted to stay a professor. The sort of how we met Hummer Windblad was actually through the business plan competition. So Stanford has, Berkeley has one as well, but Stanford has a business plan competition. We entered that. We somehow happened to win it. And Windblad was a judge in the final round and liked what she saw. I think never let go of us after that. It was 2002, which, as you mentioned, was pretty much the bottom in Silicon Valley. Raising money was really, really difficult. I think it's a lot easier if you do it these days. It took us still about half a year to get from sort of some interest from investors to actually closing the investment. We took a lot of time to talk to a lot of different VCs. I mean, in my experience, the number one reason why startups fail is that the team blows up. And the team can be either the founders between each other start fighting, or the founders start fighting with VCs, or new management comes in and starts fighting with everybody. But basically, if you don't have a very, very cohesive team that's really on the same page in terms of what needs to be done, there's a big danger of things, when you hit bumps in the road and things get difficult and complicated, that things will sort of will not work out well. So we talked to a lot of VCs, and sort of, as you said, you very quickly get an idea of what are the differences between VCs in terms of how active they're willing to help you or not. There's also big differences in to what extent do they actually understand what you're trying to do. If you have to explain them for too much time, especially if you have to explain the market to them, it's probably not a very good sign. So at the very beginning, we basically told our VCs, look, we're looking for people who can really help us build this thing. I mean, we have 3 students here. None of us had ever had a real job before. We need help. We need actually more than just strategic help. We need actually help in implementing the very basic things, like putting together everything from financial system to healthcare, for the company, finding office space and so on. So at the beginning, Todd was basically our sort of interim CFO and sort of just overseeing what we did there. We were pretty much ready to print Prashant business cards with the Vultr logo on it because he camped out in our office so much. We had weekly meetings with Anne and Ken Bellingson from Morgenthau, who was the other investor. They were really, at our request, they were really involved in sort of getting us off the ground. We then went to sort of bi-weekly meetings and monthly meetings. Eventually hired some, as we were joking, parental supervision in the form of a CEO that we picked together, and then really started building the company. At this point, we're about 100 people, 80 in the United States, plus 25 in India, and building enterprise software.
Yeah. So, I may get in trouble for asking this, but what do you think Berkeley can learn from Stanford about creating an entrepreneurial environment on campus?
Choose your words carefully.
It's a political question.
Yeah, but I'd like your answer. Yeah.
So let me sort of try to be very careful and answer it more indirectly. I mean, it seems to me that the key thing that drives entrepreneurship is sort of people that know how to do it or they've seen it before, and secondly, sort of the human networks that really help you. Find advisors, investors, and so on. I mean, one of the amazing things in Stanford for me was that I could basically go to my advisor and say, hey, I have some new research results for the week, show him some impressive graphs and hope that he's happy, and eventually lets me graduate. But at the same time, I could basically go to him and, by the way, we just received a term sheet. What do you think of this term sheet? And he would have a sort of educated opinion about it and could really help me. So this networking, sort of making sure that those people that you have inside your school sort of are known. And a lot of this is informal at the end of the day, but sometimes you can create some sort of focal points where you can meet these people, that just make sure that everybody knows who has had experience, who can go to. I think that really helped a lot when we were starting our company.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. So Mark, would you like to tell us about yourself and your company?
Okay. Well, my name is Mark Tolliver, and I'm CEO of a company in San Francisco called Alameda. And our job is to help people sort of utilize and innovate in this world of mixed code. In other words, today, one of the biggest deals going on in the software industry is the whole open source software phenomenon. And it is fundamentally changing the way software is created and built and used and so on. And in the process of all of that, I think that one of the secondary effects is that organizations are now understanding that in order to leverage the use of open source code effectively, that they're going to need to think differently about how they put together the infrastructure for designing software, for supporting software, for finding things like vulnerabilities and other things that in the past they didn't have to think quite that much about, because it was either software that their team wrote for them in their company, or they bought it from some big commercial software company and they took care of it. And today, as we roll forward into this era of mixed code, or companies that use some open source and some of their own, it really begs the question, how do I properly configure myself to take advantage of all this, yet build supportable, high-quality products that comply with licensing terms and so forth. By the way, everybody thinks open source code is kind of out there and free and so forth. How many licenses do you suppose that, licenses to use different kinds are associated with open source code? Any idea?
67.
That's very close. It's 67 and rising. I've heard as many as 85, but they go all the way from very well-defined things like the GPL code license to kind of undefined things like the Buy Me a Beer license, which is, if you ever meet me, you can use my software, but you have to buy me a beer. So there's a lot of sort of interesting, or the guitar license, we found one of those once. You must buy me a guitar if you use my software. Anyway, there's a lot of new territory being staked out today in terms of how do I properly use all of this code that's out there, contribute to it, use it in my products and so forth. So anyway, we're a small company in San Francisco put together to build the tools to help people manage their use of software in this mixed code world. I guess I fit into the category of parental supervision with this company. I did not found the company, but joined it about a year ago, somewhat as you described. My own career in high tech has been kind of a long one. A bunch of time with HP right out of college, and did a lot of interesting things there. Helped HP start their workstation business years ago. And how many? You guys are all too young. Apollo Computer, remember that? You do? Amazing. Anyway, I was responsible for turning Apollo Computer into an HP company once upon a time, during that period of time. Then went to a startup, a hardware startup called MassPar during the days of massively parallel computing. And if you want a nice research project, which is only a research project, you could try something like that. We built 16,384 processor computers for a short time. And then went to Sun for 10 years and did some really interesting stuff at Sun. Things like helped develop a small Java platform and put it on cell phones and set-top boxes and automobiles and things like that. Did the deal at Sun of moving all the Netscape code into Sun, all the enterprise software Netscape code, and managed that as something we called at the time iPlanet, which, by the way, is where I figured out that you've got to respect other people's licenses carefully, because the Netscape code has several hundred licenses that they didn't know about that were embedded in their code, and we sort of had to sort out. Also did a lot of small Java things like that at Sun, and then joined Alameda. And the interesting piece of Alameda is how would one go search binary code, Java namespace, source code, etc., and dig out and find and match up all the possible information about the things, the source code or the code snippets that we find there. And so we have invented and patented an algorithm called massive multi-pattern search. And it actually turns into a fairly interesting research topic in itself, just figuring out how to read code at both a high level and very forensic level and figure out what's in there and where it came from and how to work with it. So that's what, and I grew up in the Midwest, University of Illinois for engineering and University of Chicago for a business degree.
Okay, thanks. Well, I didn't want to belabor the title of our panel, Future of Enterprise Technology, but I do teach a business of software course here periodically in the business school. And one of my toughest questions, I see some of my former students up there would ask me is, how come we're not talking more about enterprise software and how do I say, well, part of the challenge is I don't really know what it is. Now, if you go to the web, you get kind of this circular definitions like enterprise software is a system that runs on an enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture is a software architecture that runs on an enterprise platform. Enterprise platform addresses problems associated with enterprise problems, and kind of this going around. And at the end, I mean, the only distinguishing features I could figure out is enterprise. From a business perspective, it's expensive, it's big, and it's unwieldy. Right? That at least was from my synopsis perspective when I thought of enterprise software. That's what I thought it was. Now, one of my hobby horses when I teach the course that I kind of constantly impressing on my students is that, to me, there are kind of three end games of software. One is cheap shrink-wrap software that you put on a PC. Another is a web application, and the third is open source. Right? So, I guess to me, I wanted to pause and spend some time on the panel. It is an interesting question. If we start at big and unwieldy, and we end up as either shrink-wrap, open source, or web application, there's got to be a lot of changes in between. So what do you see as the future of enterprise software? And do you, aside from sitting on panels, do you self-identify as an enterprise software company? Mark, do you want to take that away?
Well, there are a bunch of questions in there, so I'll just be...
Yeah, choose any one that you like.
I think, look, the biggest asset that most companies or organizations has is the software that runs it. If you really stop to think about it, they probably put more money in that than they put in their buildings, or unless you're a semiconductor company, your equipment perhaps. But for most companies, the institutional memory, the value, the way the company works, etc., is that software product or stack of applications that runs their business. And I think it's all enterprise software, and it is a huge asset. And people spend an inordinate amount of time and attention to build it, maintain, and make sure that it's secure and does what they want it to do. So I think in terms of changes that are going on, I think there are a few, and you talked about most of them. One of them is software as a service. I think we're going to see more and more of that in the enterprise space. The other one is the question of how do I make it secure, right? Because every day, 300,000 IDs leaked out and they're sitting out where they're not supposed to be. And then finally, there's going to be this whole notion of how do I build it using a lot of open source code, because that is so much more productive and I want and less expensive and faster, and I want to do that. So I think the whole enterprise. I noticed in the lobby, this building sits 200 feet from the Hayward Fault, so I think there is some seismic shifts underway in the enterprise software space around the notion of doing it as a service, doing it as open source, and so on.
Thank you. Let's pass it on.
So let's see. So first of all, we're calling ourselves an enterprise software company. So I guess in theory I should know what that means. I think, sort of, I look back, we sort of started out by just building a product without really thinking, without tailoring it specifically to a large enterprise sale, in part because we didn't exactly know what a large enterprise sale would be at the end of the day. I think and we're still selling product to very small organizations which probably wouldn't classify as an enterprise software sale. So I think if I try to reflect, the two big things that stand out that sort of make shrink-wrap software or even like small organization software different from enterprise software seems to be, on one side, that large enterprises have a lot more requirements around scalability, administration, audit trails, the capability to delegate administration, and role-based access and things like that. So basically, if you had an application that does one thing, before you could go into an enterprise and sell it to 450,000 people, you would need you'd have to build management layers on top of this thing. would allow you to have different parts of the enterprise, administer different parts of the system. You have to work with different data centers. So we have one customer now that has 9 data centers around the world where our software is running. That all has to talk to each other, has to make sure that if one goes down, the others pick up, and so on. So that's sort of on the technical side. And the other side is that if you're selling enterprise software, it's very, very different from a normal software sale because it's much more of a consultative sale. You need a sales force that understands these type of sales. They're particularly pretty expensive, and you need a lot of money from VCs in order to build these type of sales forces. And it's much more complex, a longer sales cycle, much more complex sell to them.
Well, in terms of identifying yourself, we do think that we're enterprise software. In fact, we call it ourselves on our website, you see. So in terms of what that really means, if you look at what our software does, what we're predominantly doing is protecting their data. So if you want to look at what enterprise means in that context, you're looking at, for example, there's a customer I was just talking to today that had a business impact analysis done that was saying that if they had some of their other enterprise applications.
Rajiv, if you could go back to the Rockstar thing, yeah, thanks.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
So basically, this particular customer I was talking to had a business impact analysis done, and they basically had been told that if he had a downtime of 3 hours, they would be losing $7 million for each of those 3 hours. So if you look at it from that perspective, they have a hefty set of requirements, as in they want to come back up as soon as possible. And a lot of the things that were mentioned before are directly relevant to us in terms of how do they want to operate across data centers if this data center goes down. And talking about seismic zones, a lot of our customers actually use our software, go from one fault to one plate to a different plate. In fact, we have tons of customers that just do protection against earthquakes, and in different areas of the country, different things. So if you look at it from the open source perspective, again, it's a curious thing that was brought up. We actually do use a bunch of open source and stuff, and I wouldn't want to call our software as being unwieldy. Actually, open source helps quite a bit in there. One of the things I've noticed in terms of customers' enterprise software stacks is there's a lot more of the open source in-house. And it is ending up simplifying some of the installations they have. So in terms of the futures, this is again, there's a little bit of a melding going on from a virtualization perspective. So we are seeing that software is being used to virtualize a lot of the infrastructure elements of things. So you could consider that enterprise software as well, and we have to deal with that part of it. So to summarize, I would just say that anything that helps people actually generate business, obviously you have to have the back-end infrastructure. So any small part of it usually has a ton of complications associated with it by nature because of the complexity of the business. You are ending up reflecting that in the software itself. And we are no different along those lines.
So Tom, maybe to sharpen up the question for you, what do you like about the enterprise market as a particular focus for your investment?
Well, at the moment, we don't like a lot about enterprise software. But let me back up. My comments, obviously, are through the prism of an investor. And the term enterprise software obviously has changed over time. Now, if you go back into the 80s, enterprise software was any application that was written on an IBM 360 or an HP 3000. And it did financial transactions for the organization, or maybe it did manufacturing. And that was the enterprise software that ran the corporation. There are some obvious big examples of what really enterprise software is when you think of the Apollo system or the Sabre system that runs the airline's reservation systems. I mean, they're on big mainframes, and I think they're built into the ground in New Mexico, hardened, so because if they go down, the whole, I mean, if you can't sell a seat on an airplane, you don't have any revenue. As we moved into the client-server era, that is when the advent of relational databases took off. And I've made this point before that it, again, looking through the eyes of an investor, if you invested in Sybase or Oracle or Informix or Ingress, you made money. Because they all did well. Certainly Oracle, much later, became the winner. But their enterprise software was a very robust marketplace that had plenty of greenfield ahead of it because there was a new kind of platform. And even though Oracle started, Sybase got a real, because they were the first to come out with stored procedures and triggers, and that was a leg up. And so, and if you even go back before the client-server era, just the desktop era, certainly Microsoft was the dominant force because of the operating system, and then they built upon that. But, remember Lotus came out with 1.2.3, and it's hard for folks to remember, but there was a time when Lotus's revenue surpassed Microsoft because 1.2.3 was the defining enterprise application for the desktop. The reason that, from an investor now, that enterprise software is not thought of highly is because once there's, the database is now a commodity, and the dominant player obviously is Oracle, but there's others, and all of these applications that have been built on a database, it's just hard to find room to prosper. So that leaves you with, in my judgment, two different ways of going. One, you can choose a vertical market, and to be successful in a vertical market, you must know that market cold. You must know it better than anyone else. You must know what all the customers want. For example, nothing simple, but a simple, when you check into a hotel, a reservation system when you check in. Well, there are many people that got into that business. Very few have succeeded. There's one or two, but you have to understand the nuances of, for example, in the 90s, if you didn't have a feature that allowed people to share rooms and when you were checking out to share the bill, that was not a good application because hotels needed that. They needed that functionality. And there's no general software company that could really fulfill that unless you had a very flexible database that would allow the end user to configure it. In that case, that wouldn't work because hotels largely don't have computer programmers to do this stuff. So the guys that really understood these intense, there's a software company that some friends of mine have, I forget the name of it now, but they run the operations of many of the ports. And they have like a 90% market share because there's just particular functionality about dealing with all the cargo, et cetera, that no general purpose enterprise software companies get to go after. Okay, as an investor, we find those somewhat unappealing because just how do you know you've got the right functionality and how do you know that you've got the right team that really knows that? It's really, really hard to do. So what we look for in a crowded market is something that is going to disrupt the existing market of the legacy vendors. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, delivering software in this new hosted model it's not the end-all and be-all, but it certainly is a way that is disrupting some of the lock that the existing enterprise software companies have in corporations. And again, Salesforce.com is probably the best example of that, but there are many, many others. So when I hear that enterprise software is dead, I think that's a superficial analysis of it. It's because I think there are new delivery mechanisms, and certainly the internet has made it possible now for corporations to do business, what I call outside the four walls of the corporation. And enterprise software, when you think of it, it's really in the four walls of the corporation. So there is new functionality actually that can be provided, specifically with software as a service and some other things. So I think there's plenty of opportunities to start companies. I think there's plenty of opportunities, but I think you got to be very realistic that if you go into a venture with the idea that you're going to build something better and you will have a better sales force, et cetera, that's just a very tough way to go about it, because it's just, you'll be knocking up against existing entrenched players, Oracle, IBM, SAP, Microsoft, that will always tell the customer, well, we can do that too. And you're going to have to find a solution that basically, in my judgment, flies under their radar screen and eats them from underneath.
So actually, that kind of transitions well into the last round of formal questions that I have here, which is basically about business expectations or financial expectations of outcomes. So certainly we've seen a lot of. Can you hear me back? Okay. We've seen a lot of change in that over the last 5 years, and so maybe starting with you, John, in terms of when you invest now, what is a good outcome for you? And I really mean dollars and cents here. You know,
Sure.
What would be a good M&A? What would be a good IPO
Sure.
for you?
It's this is co-varied over time, okay? But right now, we have to be very realistic. The public market is not a robust market at the moment, although we believe it will be in the latter half of 2006. The investors and founders really only make money one of two ways. So they make money on one, a liquidity event. And a liquidity event is just one of two. You're either purchased or you sell shares in the public market. In order to sell shares in the public market now, you're looking at companies have to have at least, a little bit of rule of thumb, about $40 million behind you in a runway. So you have to have probably closed a year to close to $40 million. That is a high hurdle.
John, and you know, just $40 million, what kind of earnings, what kind of
Sure.
growth rate?
Growth is much more important than earnings. And if you don't want to be caught in what is unaffectionately referred to as micro-cap hell, meaning you manage to get public and you have a market cap of around 150 million when most public market investors are not allowed to even invest in companies that have that small market cap. You're looking at now you would feel successful if you have a market cap of at least 300 million. When we invest in a company, we hope it can get to that. And so we have to be very realistic about the valuations that we pay. Now, the other thing we look for is if you have put together an operating plan, your operating plan has to bear some kind of resemblance to existing similar companies. If you are starting a software as a service company, for example, and in your some of the premises upon which your customer acquisition is based or your churn is based, if it is different, if it is wildly different than what is existing, then it probably is not going to make sense. So we pay a lot of attention to what kind of margins you're going to project, what kind of all the different financial ratios, because there is market efficiency does eventually take over. So the deal specifically, we do a lot of early stage investing. And you know, we try to, most of our deals are in the range of 4 to 5 million pre-money valuations, give or take. We know there's going to be several rounds. We hope there is no more than 3 rounds. And the signature that we like to invest in is we hope that the companies in total will not need anything more than $15 to $20 million. If they need more than that, and they're a software company, by and large, something's going wrong.
And so, given this kind of typical signature or this trajectory, what would so are you happy with an M&A outcome? And what would that have to look like for that for that you to be happy with that as a portfolio company?
Well, we like to encourage our companies to shoot for an IPO. It's kind of like if you shoot for New York, you might end up in Chicago, but if you shoot for Chicago, you're going to end up in Des Moines. So, yes, we will have some M&A outcomes. We hope they will work well for us, and we hope they will work well for the founders. But in order for that to happen, the founders have to be acutely aware of the capital that they raise, and they ought to try to get as far as they can on the least amount of capital, because that's the way that their interests are protected as well. And we really try to advise people that way. I am in the midst of a company that will be acquired, I think, in the next 2 months, and I think it's going to be acquired for around $150 million, and it's going to be a very good outcome for everybody.
Okay, great. So, Rajiv, when you started your company, what were your financial expectations? What success looked like to you?
It was more from a customer acquisition, but if you look at it from a financial perspective, we thought that by around 2007 to 2008, there was a potential for us to cross the 100 million mark. I mean, that's again, when we start out, we have rosy pictures of everything. But just to continue on that thought, enterprise software, at least the way we sell it, it's not the service model. We're actually selling shrink-wrap software to enterprises with a lot of the same consultative sales. It is a tough, hard business. It takes a lot of work to actually make any sale. But that said, because there is an opportunity still, or else we wouldn't be here, to be able to leverage some of the newer technology gains and use that as a way to go under and eat up, as John was mentioning. So from our perspective, even though some of the big guys have a lock in the market we're going after is an existing one, although it's undergoing a sea change. So what it means from our perspective is we'd actually have to sell our software not just directly to customers, but we would have to sell our software to the people that have the lock-in on the market itself. They have more resources, they can actually close more deals than we do, which means that the distribution model has to be well thought out. This is one thing that from our background is kind of known to us, but it is a pretty tough one to pull off. So if someone wants to do this, they really need to know what the distribution channels will be for the software. And doing it as a service is definitely a more economical way of doing it, but it doesn't work for all kinds of software. From the other financial perspective, again, distribution channels take out some of the margins. You go and sell it to someone else, they're going to keep a lot of it for themselves. So what that means from a financial perspective is you can go so far in terms of the revenues as you build up on a standalone basis. But we're aware of companies that have been around for 12 years and have been stuck in the $50 to $60 million range. So it's a pretty tough one to get out of that, especially if it's not a really breakthrough market. And the sand industry in the previous decade was that way. Within the software, it's very tough. The entrance players can move fast, find that lost a year, but they can catch up within a year. So it's all about getting the partners on board and getting them selling your software and doing a revenue ramp based on that versus trying to scale up on your internal sales. So that actually brings about, again, at least from an image perspective, we're always looking at the bottom line perspective. We're not looking at it from a single exit, which means that you cannot bet your horses on a single channel. So you want to go customers, you want to go partners, you want to go OEMs in our language. So the way it works out is based on past experiences. One of these guys realizes the potential of what you have to offer, and we might end up in Chicago, essentially.
Great, thanks.
So I think pretty much everything's been said already. I guess the encouragement to shoot for New York worked in our case.
Well, Guido, I mean, I guess it's a personal question in the sense of, for these aspiring entrepreneurs, I mean, implicit in my question is the notion that financial expectations were a primary driving factor, but maybe that's not true. I mean, part of the question is I guess the sub-question is, were financial expectations an integral part of your founding the company? Or is it you're trying to build a company, and if the IPO or the big merger comes along, or acquisition, then that's great, but you're happy to run this company?
So for us, it was definitely not something that we sort of had in mind when we started the company, which was hopefully different for the investors. So in our case, we really were focused on, we have a very interesting new technology here, which is disruptive, which is sort of game-changing in the security space. Can we build a standalone company here? And that sort of is the aiming for New York, right? Can we build this as a standalone company that sort of changes the way how large corporations manage security in-house, and basically replaces a whole slew of different point solutions in that space? I definitely didn't have any clear dollar figure on how much money I want to make or should the company be. So when we started, on the other hand, sort of building something as a standalone company sort of implies that you get to those numbers that John put out.
So Mark, something tells me that with your industry experience, maybe you're going to give us a little bit different answer to that question. Is it possible you had some financial expectations when you joined Parliament?
Well, yeah, but I tell you what, if the only reason you're being an entrepreneur or thinking about going to a small company is purely on the financial side of things, that's not right. It's just not right. Because successful companies, I think, or successful ventures of any sort, are equal parts of passion and realism, right? And the passion side must be you must be interested in what you do. And in my particular case, with this Palamita thing, I spent 3 years sorting out the Netscape code at huge cost to try and get the rights to actually resell it. Three full years with a whole bunch of people working on it, right? And I'm convinced, in my using this as an example, that most organizations, as we go into this world, will need to do that. And frankly, I never let my kids download and copy music, right? Because I think software has value. People who write software should be able to recognize the value of the code that they have written, whether their code comes out of a guitar or out of a keyboard. It's all kind of the same sort of thing. And so you have to have a little bit of belief in what you're doing. And once you've got that, then I think you got to be realistic about building a business with it. And some of the things that I think are important about that, from a small company's perspective, how soon can you be larger than life? Right? By larger than life, I mean more people know about you than should, given your size, and more people are interested in you than should, given your size. And the answer to that is you've got partnerships in the industry, you've got to use opportunities to be in interesting places with your message, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to be larger than life soon, and then you've got to hit critical mass. And I think critical mass means that you've got enough reach that you can get to customers who might have some interest in what you do, that you can support your customers well, when they have a question, they have an issue, that you're capable of supporting them, that you can run a roadmap of R&D and investment that's such that it keeps you ahead of what people think they want to do, and you've got enough customers out there with terrific relationships that you do know what to build next. You do know what feature to add. You do get close to what's going on. I think critical mass in the software company world, somewhere, I don't know, $20, $30 million in revenue, something like that. And until then, you've got to work on the larger-than-life stuff and running real fast. And so, I don't know, that's kind of my sense of how this works. And I will tell you that it is a terrific amount of fun. In other words, if you do take the leap into small company world, it is very energizing because of the fact that, I mean, it lives or dies on your expertise and your willingness to be smart about what you do and be passionate about what you do. And I think it's terrific training and terrific experience for anyone who decides to go that way.
All right. Well, thank you. So I think what I'd like to do is open it up to the audience now for questions, and I just kind of want to, kind of set the dynamic here a little bit. So, all these gentlemen have other things they could be doing this afternoon. So they came here to meet you, to get to know you folks. They may be looking for faculty as advisors, or for or John may be looking for them to do due diligence. Of course, John's looking for the exciting new business plan. That's going to be his next star portfolio company. These companies are hiring, so they're looking for interns as well as full-time employees. So basically the point is they're all happy to meet you. But before we kind of transition into just kind of the cocktail hour thing, happy to take any questions from the audience for these people while they're here. George?
Yes, so I think most of us know...
Actually, why don't you introduce yourself to them?
I'm George Nicola. I'm a faculty in ECS, and I work on software and programming languages, compilers, tools for finding bugs in software. But my interest is in... we know all about this model in which graduate students or faculty take a break of academia or leave academia to pursue their ideas. But is there a valid model in which you don't have to kind of quit your academia or quit doing your PhD, some sort of consulting, not just for faculty, but I think students would find that useful to get involved with startups before they're ready to actually do their own.
That's I understand the dilemma. There's a love of academia and what you're doing, which is really a wonderful thing.
I'm also worried about my students quitting, so.
Yeah, I get that too. The tension arises when, look, these guys will tell you, it's hard to be successful, and these guys are working untold hours. And I think the tension arises when you have a bunch of guys working all these hours, and then you have someone else in the organization that works part-time and then goes back to academia. It can create some problems. And obviously that can be overcome, but it's got to be very transparent in the sense the guy's working all the time. You got to have a lot more stock than the people working half time. Things like that. I mean, so but the idea as an investor, if I'm looking at a company and I think people are half time because it's that half when they're away, they may get distracted about something else. It's not a very appealing investment opportunity. In the same way that the investors that have invested in Hummer Windblad, they make me sign a document that this is my full-time gig and I'm not doing anything else. So it's I don't have an answer for you. All I'm saying is it's not easy.
I completely agree. Just to make it a little bit more personal, when I started Voltage, I had my PhD almost done, but still needed to defend and write up my thesis. And they were some of the most painful months of my entire life. I mean, so startup is a full-time job where basically you're always struggling to find enough sleep for yourself. So putting anything on top of that just throws you completely off balance. I've seen, so as a founder, I think the short answer is it's not possible. I mean, a startup is 100% job. I've seen a few successful models where basically grad students consulted for startups that were sort of in a similar space. I mean, then you can't really be a founder, but you can sort of be there 1 or 2 afternoons a week, work on sort of cutting edge projects, and those can be very, very interesting. We've done that in a few cases.
Other questions? Right, there in the back.
I've been in software for about 30 years.
If you could introduce yourself for the...
I'm nobody.
Okay.
I've been in software for about 30 years. For the longest time, enterprise software meant software that was either too complex or too poorly documented for companies to install and manage themselves. I think this open software thing has made companies more honest in the true quality of their software and their software engineering. I think this will be seen even more in the future.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you for your comment. Good. You start in the front here.
Yeah, so I had a question.
And
for
if
John.
you, again, they'd like to know who you are, so...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm Matt Denny. I'm a graduate student in the CS department. It seems like at least the companies you brought representing you today they're kind of enabling technologies of a lot of enterprise software. That it's nothing that an end user would log on to. It's things supporting other software such as backup, encryption, and licensing. And I was wondering if that's an explicit strategy you have as far as investing, or if that's just a coincidence that these are the people you brought here today. And what other enabling technologies would you like to see come out for enterprise software?
Well, it is coincidence, but maybe not quite. As I mentioned, if you're thinking of software that everyone uses in their day-to-day life, I think of just all the Microsoft Office uses, and certainly that's a very competitive business, and I can't think of anything where I could invest in that area that would make a good investment. Even some of the, I looked early on at some of the very early companies that would enable you to restore your photographs and do a lot of things with them. You know, very early on, because I thought there would be a huge market for that with the growth of digital cameras and all the JPEG images flying around, and then you see a company like Google just gives that technology away. If you ever looked at Picasso, it's a fabulous program and it's free. And as an investor, we have to be very careful about investing in things where, you know, if you're an economist, where the economic rents can be taken out of it like that. We have found that what we like to invest in is where we say there's real science. And in many cases, enabling technology has real science, and it's hard to duplicate. And that's when, if you can find some things that are what we think are hard to duplicate, we think they might be a little bit more defensible. Yeah, you know, as investors, we have to be very paranoid, because it really is, these guys have to compete against really huge organizations with many times inferior technology but huge sales forces. And they have to compete against inertia, and they have to compete against fun. Anytime I see, even if I'm tempted when I see a clever little desktop application, I have to ask myself, well, what is Microsoft Office 12 going to have? Because I know it's going to be for free. So it's just hard. That's why when we see something that we think is a little bit more disruptive. By the way, that's why we made the investment in Napster, because we thought that whole peer-to-peer architecture was a disruptive idea, and it still is. This whole idea of self-publishing and a lot of things that could happen with peering, we thought was very interesting. That's why we invested in it.
Another question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Keshav. I'm an undergraduate here, and I'm wondering if you think there is a future for decision support systems for managers, and also to what extent do you think management can be practiced as a science as opposed to an art?
I'll take that. I don't think there's a future in decision support systems. I think it, sadly, for me at least, there is a pedagogy involved in it, and I just find that to be a very dicey investment thesis.
Could you just expand on that? You mean it's like a missionary style kind of thing? You have
No, it's just like, it's like this whole idea of what is best practices. I'm just suspicious if someone is trying to promulgate an idea that this is best practices. You know, it's like, what is a standard? You know, my friend Scott McNeely has the best answer to what is a standard. Volume equals a standard. You know, whoever has the most volume, that's the standard. Now, I do think there is real market opportunities for what I call dashboards and showing to management what is really happening by their users. And we have a terrific investment in a company called Omniture in Orem, Utah, that is delivered as software as a service, but it shows to managers almost everything that is going on their site. Hewlett-Packard, for example, has instrumented every page on their website with it, and this is this high-end analytics. To the extent that that is decision support, I think there's a big opportunity for things like that.
Great. Tom?
Tom Cleal in the Chancellor's Office. If we look at the companies that Berkeley traditionally collaborates with, it's the larger companies like the HPs, the IBMs, the Microsofts, because they're the ones that are in a position to be able to invest in the coin of the realm, which is graduate students and postdocs. How would you see, do you think there's any opportunity for increased collaboration between Berkeley researchers and students and startup companies, and what would that look like?
I'll take a shot at that. I do think there's an opportunity. It might not be as large as what HB can afford you, but I can personally say that there have been several projects, not just Berkeley in general, that have very direct relevance to what we're trying to do. So some of the things that are being done are not some things that are in commercial projects by any means. So from that perspective, to get those people in adds a significant value add that contributes directly to the bottom line. So the kind of experience that we would give as a startup is different than SB, because I've seen the same researchers going to SB and Veritas, and they're spending a lot of time on research products, or projects rather, versus where we are trying to actually incorporate them directly into products. So because of the smaller amount of resources we have, we're much more focused on getting things to market. So that's a different, as in we can contribute on a smaller scale, but your satisfaction level will be higher because you're actually seeing it used by end users.
Now, I'll just take a quick answer there. I don't think it's ever going to happen in the way that perhaps HP or Intel's going to do it by writing a big check to fund research for the campus. But I do think, I mean, I'd love to have a technical advisory council for my little company, right? So I think there are opportunities for people from academia who have an interest in this space and who have some, time to devote to it in return for, a very modest stock position or something like that.
How modest?
Very modest.
That's just a professor question, I'm sure.
It sort of depends. I mean,
Well, that's right. I should say very
the
modest.
other people on the Google advisory board was probably enough to buy a small airplane or something.
Yeah, they're flying in their airplanes from their advisory board, I suppose. But anyway, I think there's things like that which could pay some benefits both ways, and maybe over time grow into the sort of thing that you're thinking about. So it's it's kind of like a seed program to some extent, and some of these companies maybe grow up and then contribute in a more traditional fashion.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think you should lose sight of the fact, it's got to be a two-way street, and there are things at the university that are, look, university environments are very fertile places, and a lot happens on them. And let's not forget, you folks know how Cisco got started. Really, Cisco got started. There was a local area network at the business school at Stanford, and there was a local area network on the campus, and they didn't talk to one another. And guys would say, well, how do we just write a bridge? Well, so Sandy and Lynn Bozak wrote a bridge so the two local area networks could talk to one another. That was the beginning of Cisco Systems. So, so there can be things that actually are kind of spawned here that on campuses. I really believe that.
just to add to that, I mean, I think startups are a lot more tactical in a sense than the large corporations. I mean, we have neither the financial resources, sort of, nor this kind of approach to sort of say invest in something, maybe it'll pay off in a year or something like that. For us, I mean, for me to go to my CEO and say, hey, there's an interesting research project, I'd like to fund this thing. The question would be, is there a patent we can file afterwards? Is there, a new feature we can offer on our product? Maybe a new product we could build here. And that's obviously not easy, and it also is, as he said, it's going to be at a much, much smaller scale than classical industry funding is.
So there's an additional data point. We do actually have a professor on our technical advisory board, and we certainly use him for a lot of things. Tom from Berkeley.
So we have at this point 2 faculty, one from the UC system, one from Stanford, in the advisory board. And pretty much any Stanford startup that I know has 1 or 2 academics on the technical advisory board for credibility initially. There's definitely a market there.
Question?
So you mentioned
Can you identify yourself?
I'm Hemant Patel. I'm an undergrad senior, computer science. And I was going to ask you a question about, you mentioned the service model for the software delivery. And so I was just wondering, and you mentioned that it lets the enterprises not prevent me from being locked out, but doesn't the service model also provide its own sense of lockout? Because suppose, for example, Salesforce is storing the data for a lot of these different companies, but if a company wanted to switch from Salesforce to something else, it's really hard, or it's a different kind of lockout, right? But it is still a lockout.
Well, I think I said, or if I didn't, I should have said, this new delivery model is not, there are many pluses to it, there are some minuses to it, and it doesn't, I don't think it serves all applications. But it is clear, Mark Benioff has proved that what the gentleman said in the back about enterprise software being too hard to implement and the documentation sucks, and Mark Benioff proved that is what's happening this evening. There's no doubt about that. He proved it. I don't care what Tom Siebel said, he proved it. And there will be, you're always going to see, as long as I've been investing in software, there's going to be different dislocations that technology causes. And this, as a delivery mechanism, is just, I think, the latest. And it's not going to last forever. Yes, sir.
This is not the same subject, so
Okay.
it's in turn for another question.
Yeah.
This is not about enterprise software, it's about investing. So much of the economic activity that's happening now is because of advertising on the internet. That's why Google's where it is. What's going to happen when every browser comes with ad block pre-installed so that you don't see any advertising anymore?
You can already do that, actually.
I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think people enjoy seeing ads, believe it or not. I mean, remember, ads are kind of, okay, we all have TiVo now, so we can, we go through these things, and you can set your, but every now and then I click on it if I see something. Ads can provide some value to you, but certainly, one thing is true. If advertisers think that they're not getting the click-through, then the rates will go down. There's no issue about that. In fact, Google will be the most transparent about that. So, because they have been the most transparent to date to telling the advertisers what they're getting for their click. I mean, and it's, these models are getting toward, pay for transaction, not just site. So, if in fact your scenario would come to be true, I don't think it will, but if it did, hey, rates are going to go down. Absolutely.
I thought of a good business plan for how to make money off of that, and that is to come up with some kind of web technology that requires that your ads be seen in order for the page to be viewed. Technologically requires.
There you go. Did you bring it today? So maybe that's a good transition. I'm going to use moderator's privilege here and ask the last question. So John, what are your hot buttons these days in terms of particular areas that you're looking for to invest that you think are good, where there are good opportunities?
Okay, this is not a cop-out, but I really do let the entrepreneurs kind of lead me to where...
That's what all venture capitalists say, right?
No, they don't. A lot of them sit here and pontificate about what they think is going to happen. So that is one thing. I can tell you there's some clever things since we've talking a little bit, or the conversation migrated a little bit towards search. There's a little company I invested in about 8 months ago that I'm very high on, a company called Baynote. And since we're talking about search, it really doesn't do search. But once you get to the site, it'll take you immediately to what you're looking for. And it does that by what they call the wisdom of the community. And I find that technology very, very interesting. We invested in a company about a year ago. Again, it was software as a service, a company called Five9. I find it really interesting. They're not here on this panel. And that was, I call it a call center in a box. If you're a company that you wanted to have all of the call center technology using VoIP, but all of the functionality, they have that as a service for you. So you supply the bodies, they supply the technology, and you're up working. You got a full-fledged call center in a day. It's kind of interesting. I think what these guys are doing is just fabulous. All this stuff is real science in the 3 companies here. There's real science in it. I find that interesting. But really, we don't have preconceived notions, but we are pattern matchers in some sense. And that's the best I can tell you.
Okay, great. So I think that's enough fun for one day. And Tom says he's got some lemonade and cookies out there, or something.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah, let's find out. Okay. Thank the panelists very much.